You're listening to the Shaughnessy Group podcast, insights on buying, selling, and growing Canadian businesses in the lower middle market. Let's begin.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us. Today we're tackling a topic that is, it's perhaps the most significant financial and personal event in an entrepreneur's life. Successfully selling their business, we've got a really dense stack of sources here that lays out the specialized knowledge you need to navigate this process.
And to actually get to the closing table.
Exactly.
It's a landmark event, absolutely. And I think we have to start this deep dive with a foundational truth. The skills, the entrepreneurial genius that let you build a successful business, they're fundamentally different from the skills you need to sell that business successfully.
Right.
So our mission today is to sort of extract that essential map for a successful exit.
Okay, let's unpack that right away. Because when most business owners think about selling, their mind goes to one place, the price, the highest possible price.
Of course.
But you're suggesting that focusing purely on that maximum number can actually, sabotage the whole thing?
It can. It's the big counterintuitive insight of M&A. I mean, impressive historical revenues are great. You need them. But if maximum value is your only goal, you might push terms too hard, you might alienate buyers, or, and this is the most common, you overlook the massive amount of prep work needed to actually close the deal.
And a transaction that falls apart at the last minute.
Gives you a price of zero, no matter how high that initial valuation was.
So the process, the preparation, it matters just as much as the asking price. Maybe more.
Okay, so if we assume a sale is on the horizon, what's the single most critical thing to focus on right now, the operational imperative?
The owner and the management team must, first and foremost, stay laser focused on operating the business, on building its success, and this is the key part, without regard for the possibility of a sale. You just can't allow the idea of a transaction to become an excuse for slowing down.
That feels like a monumental ask, though. The whole team knows this massive change is coming. How do you prevent that distraction?
Well, you see the failure immediately in the trend lines. The trend lines.
Yeah. Buyers analyze your performance right up to the day of closing. So if management gets distracted by, endless sale meetings, or they pause a critical hire, or delay some necessary spending because they think, the new owners will handle it.
That shows up in the numbers.
It shows up as a performance dip.
Yeah.
And any drop-off, will either discourage offers completely or, more likely, the buyer comes back and demands a pretty big adjustment to the purchase price.
That's a powerful point. The buyer's paying for the future. And if the present is already trending down, that future looks a lot less valuable. And just to be clear for everyone listening, our sources are all focused on the sale of a healthy business here.
Right.
We're not getting into the complexities of selling a distressed company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is all about validating that high price you're asking for. Maintaining momentum is what proves your business is worth what you say it is.
Okay, so operational focus is locked down. The owner accepts that building is different from selling. The next step, then, is assembling the team. And the skill set has to be highly specialized.
Absolutely. The need for specialized expertise, you can't overstate it. You need a dedicated transaction team.
Both internal and external.
Both. And they all have to be able to speak the language of M&A.
Let's start with the internal team. Who needs to be in that core group?
Internally, you need your chief executive, of course, but also key leaders who are, deeply familiar with the financials, operations, all the assets and liabilities.
But how do you balance that? They have a company to run.
That's the cardinal rule.
Yeah.
Constraint. The internal team has to be strictly limited in number. And the time you ask of them has to be tightly managed. The successful companies, they set up what they call a war room protocol.
A war room.
Yeah, where maybe one or two people manage the flow of documents and they shield the rest of the operating team from all that distraction.
So it's a high wire act. You need their knowledge, but you can't let them get bogged down in the sale itself.
That's why the external professionals have to carry the load.
Okay, so who are the critical outside players?
You need highly experienced mergers and acquisitions advisors, for one, but it's also specialized legal, finance, accounting, and tax professionals. And these advisors have to be different from the folks you use for day-to-day operations. Because they need to know the current market, who the buyers are in your industry, and most importantly, they have to be experts at structuring and negotiating M&A deals. They understand things like, working capital adjustments, indemnity baskets, rep and warranty insurance. Things your general business lawyer might not deal with.
I can hear people thinking, Wow, that sounds incredibly expensive.
Mm,
Why can't my trusted attorney, my accountant I've used for years, handle this?
because the game changes completely.
Yeah.
There's a really powerful analogy that our sources kept repeating. Entering the sales negotiation against an experienced corporate buyer without your own M&A team.
Yeah.
It's like going into a gunfight armed only with a knife.
Wow. Okay, that paints a picture.
It does, because buyers do M&A all the time. For a private business owner, this is usually a once-in-a-lifetime event. That buyer's team is designed to chip away at your price.
So the value of these pros isn't just getting a higher price up front, it's making sure the price actually sticks.
That's it exactly. Their contribution almost always exceeds their fees, not just by maximizing price, but by protecting you. They make sure the process actually gets to closing on terms you can live with. They are managing risk, tax risk, legal risk that your standard advisors just aren't equipped for.
So with that A-team assembled, let's talk preparation. You have to be proactive, organized.
Yeah.
This isn't just waiting for the buyer to ask for stuff, is it?
No. Proactivity is non-negotiable. The team should develop and implement a detailed plan before the sale process even officially kicks off. You start with a really thorough internal review of the business using a checklist for your industry, and you ask yourself, what would scare me if I were buying this company?
And the most crucial logistical part of that is organizing that mountain of paperwork for due diligence.
Yes. You must organize all of that material for the buyer's due diligence ahead of time.
Into what they call a virtual data room.
Exactly, into a virtual data room. This eliminates that frantic search for documents under a tight deadline later on. It minimizes the disruption. I mean, when a buyer asks for the last 5 years of customer contracts, you don't want your sales director spending 2 weeks digging through filing cabinets.
It should just be there, instantly accessible.
Yeah.
And that pre-sale review, it often forces the business to make actual improvements, doesn't it?
It absolutely should. The review should lead to concrete action. Maybe you find that some key supplier contracts have just been allowed to lapse into evergreen status. That's a risk.
Or unfunded pension liabilities.
Address them. Or you haven't properly documented your intellectual property. You have to tighten all of that up. By fixing these things proactively, you give the buyer fewer things to complain about, fewer opportunities to try and lower the price.
Okay, let's get to the brass tacks. The money. Financial cleanup and absolute transparency seem crucial.
That's where deals live or die. A huge hurdle for private companies is the inevitable intermingling of personal and business assets.
The owner's personal plane, the family condo paid for by the company.
All of it. Personal loans to family members. All of that has to be cleanly uncoupled before the sale. And you also have to separate out any business segments that are not included in the deal.
And if you don't?
It's a significant risk. It can trigger future tax liabilities, it complicates the legal closing, and, most importantly, it gives the buyer a reason to demand money back after the closing.
Okay, so focusing on the financial reporting itself, we hear that audited statements are the gold standard. But a lot of successful smaller businesses don't have them. What's the real minimum requirement?
Audited statements provide the highest level of assurance, for sure. But the minimum is this. Your books have to be prepared and maintained in a way that would permit an audit. And they absolutely must be able to pass a quality of earnings, a QE evaluation from the buyer.
That QE process is what really validates the price, isn't it?
It's everything.
Let's dive into that. Buyers often base their valuation on adjusted EBITDA. For listeners who know the term, what are the most common adjustments that sellers really need to be ready to defend?
Well, the buyer's goal in the QOE is to find the true, repeatable profitability of the business under their ownership. So the 3 big adjustments you always see are normalizing owner compensation if the owner was taking a huge salary or tiny one, and adjusting for any related party transactions.
Like a lease on a building the owner's other company owns.
Exactly. And finally, they look really aggressively for any non-recurring items. A huge one-time litigation settlement, that's out. A major insurance payout, also out. The seller has to pre-package and justify every single add-back they use to get to their adjusted number.
Which brings us to timing. Even with clean books, if the process drags on, you have to maintain credibility.
Absolutely. Maintaining momentum requires timely reporting. Our sources were really clear on this. They emphasized producing monthly interim statements by workday 7 of the preceding month.
Not the 20th of the month. Workday 7, that's fast.
Workday 7. That level of discipline says a lot about the quality of your management.
Why is that specific rapid turnaround so crucial during the sale?
2 massive reasons. First, it proves to the buyer that the business is actually hitting the forecasts you put in your marketing documents. And second, if you can reliably produce statements that quickly, it shows you have a robust internal accounting process that's highly valued.
Slow reporting creates anxiety.
And anxiety translates to risk, which translates to a lower price.
Let's pivot to a major asset that often complicates things: real estate. For a lot of private businesses, the operating company also owns the building it's in.
Right, and you need to treat that almost as a separate business entirely.
Because it is, legally and financially.
It is. The key thing to realize is that not all buyers of your operating business want to acquire the real estate. They might prefer an asset-light strategy.
So they'd rather just lease the building.
Exactly. They'd rather lease the premises under a long-term agreement. It's called a sale-leaseback. A sale-leaseback. That seems like a good way for the seller to get the most capital out. You sell the business and you sell the property.
Precisely. The seller monetizes the assets, and the buyer doesn't have capital tied up in property. But it does complicate the deal structure a lot. You need real estate experts to negotiate all the lease terms, rent escalation, who maintains what all things the buyer will scrutinize.
And on the flip side, you might find a real estate investor who only wants the property.
Exactly. So the transaction team has to be ready to structure a deal that handles the operating business and the physical assets separately. If you can't do that, you severely limit your pool of potential buyers.
This has been an incredibly rigorous look at what it takes to actually get across that finish line. Let's summarize those core insights for our listeners.
Okay. I think we've landed on two foundational points. First, selling a business requires a dedicated, specialized M&A skill set. It's just wholly distinct from the skills you use to build a company.
Yeah.
So you have to get the external experts. And second, the process demands proactive, relentless organization. Clean financials, all your due diligence materials ready to go ahead of time,
And critically, you have to maintain that strong operational performance right through the closing.
to make sure the value you claim is the value you get.
That preparation is the ultimate insurance policy. And, here's a final thought to leave you with. Since we know potential buyers are scrutinizing trend lines, they're demanding Workday 7 reporting and requiring clean, audit-ready books. How might maintaining sale readiness, even if you have no immediate intention to sell, how might that improve the discipline and value of your business starting today? It forces you to operate at the level of a much larger public company, which can only strengthen your current profitability.
That is a great challenge to end on. Preparation for an exit is really just preparation for higher performance. Thank you for guiding us through this today.
My pleasure.
We want to thank the Shaughnessy Group for providing these detailed insights into the art of the successful business sale. If you want to dive deeper into these topics and access more resources on M&A, please visit shaughnessy.group. That's shaughnessy.group. Thanks for joining the deep dive. We'll see you next time.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not professional advice. Consult qualified advisors for your specific situation.